I'm Lisa Walton, and welcome to Quilt Stories. Today I'm talking to Cindy Grisdela, who's in Virginia, near Washington, D.C. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you having me.
Loved your quilts for ages. I love their brilliance and their vibrancy, and your style is great. It's sort of improvisational, and it makes me happy just to look at your quilts. So I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you.
So here we are with a quilt called Neapolitan. Would you like to tell me why it's called Neapolitan?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. It reminded me of the ice cream. Uh, when I was a kid, my grandmother used to serve this Neapolitan ice cream that was vanilla, strawberry, and chocolate. And it was just a treat that I got there at my grandmother's. And for some reason, these colors made me think of it. These are not my normal colors.
Mm.
So that was the backstory of that.
Yes, we used to have that too, but my sister and I used to fight over the chocolate, and neither of us liked the strawberries. So you have this sort of valley in the container. It was quite funny.
Right. Yep, we did the same thing.
So here's a pile of scraps. Is this normal for you?
Absolutely. My inspirations are often from my leftover basket. I keep baskets of scraps on my cutting table so that when I'm, cutting squaring up blocks or whatever, and I have a little piece left over, I throw it in a basket. They're all organized mostly by sort of color family. And these scraps were actually from some demonstrations that I had been doing while I was teaching. And I wanted to challenge myself to use a color palette that was different for me. You can see from the quilt behind me, most of my work is very bright and energetic, and this was something new. And I do that occasionally to challenge myself.
So are these hand dyes or commercial solids or what?
They are mostly commercial solids. A few of them are hand dyed. I tend to mix depending on the color that I want. And sometimes the hand dye is the right thing, and sometimes the commercial solids work better.
Right. And do you dye them yourself or you buy them?
I do not. I buy them. I took a dyeing class about 30 years ago, and I was awful at it. And I liked the idea, but what I came up with was something that looked a lot like tie-dye, which doesn't work well in my particular style. So I prefer to support artists who dye and do it well, and that works for me.
And always solids?
I in my current work over the last probably 6 to 8 years, I use primarily solids. Before that, I started out nearly 40 years ago as a traditional quilter. And I used print fabrics almost entirely. But a few years back, I decided that for a couple of reasons, I was going to try to move into using solid fabrics. I like the sort of the painterly quality of solids. The lines and the shapes are more distinct with solids. And also I started out as a hand quilter and then moved into doing my own free motion stitching. And I realized that the stitching doesn't really show as well on printed fabrics.
Yeah.
If I'd spent all that time trying to get good at it, I wanted people to be able to see it. So
sounds fair to me. Here's the style. Now, this is very traditional for you, these the circular shapes. Are they one block that's then cut into quarters?
No, I make the quadrants separately.
Okay.
These I call these improv curves and angled stripes. They are 2 of the 5 techniques that I use most often and that I describe in my book, Artful Improv. And I put these together. I was just experimenting with this different color scheme. I put this together and I thought, this looks a lot like a lot of my other quilts. What can I do to make it be a little bit different? And I think that asking what if is one of the most important questions in improv design. And sometimes, it's something that is necessary in more traditional work as well. But for me, what if is a really important question.
I absolutely agree. I think I spend my entire time thinking, what if?
So here you see the design is progressing a bit. It still is really, similar to other quilts that I've made, but I've made a significant stride here. and that is adding in what I call the spark. And these fabrics are cream and chocolate brown and dusty rose and taupe, a little gold. They're very almost dull, less saturated colors. And so the spark of contrast for this was that turquoise that you see starting to appear in some of those stripes. And I always, I start out with a color palette, a color recipe in mind, and then I almost always tweak it somehow to make it a little bit different, to throw in some element of surprise that the viewer has to look at and say, oh, well, that's a little different. Why did she do that?
Yeah.
So I like that.
You're a piecer, not a fuser.
I am a piecer. Yes, I do all of I know how to fuse, I know how to applique, but I prefer the machine piecing. Here I decided that I was going to blow up these curves a little bit, and I wanted to add in, for many years I didn't really use full range of values in my work. I stuck to a lot of mediums, like many quilters do, stick to a lot of mediums and some darks. I rarely involved myself very much with lights. And so again, I'm asking what if? What if I really sort of blow up these curves, add in some very light values so that I'm exploring the entire range of value from light. This is a cream color, not white, but from very light cream to that dark cinnamon, dark chocolate brown, and everything in between, because I think that it adds depth and dimension to the final composition.
Your little squares with square within a square, are they all the same size, or is that just random?
The little ones with the sort of dot of color in the center and the cream outsides, those are all the same size. They are 3.5-inch blocks that will finish to 3 inches. I kind of like the idea that they form these dots, that because your eye tends to gloss over especially once it's sewn,
Yeah.
gloss over the seams. And then that little centerpiece with the insets coming out of it is typical of my improv style. It's just picking up pieces that were, cut off or left over and sewing them together into that little improv block to form the center of the composition. I love little piecing, and I think it adds some interest to the final design.
Here it is growing.
Here it is growing. And so I don't really know when I start what this is going to look like. And you can see now that where I started with those improv curves and the angled stripes is, you can't see that structure anymore.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, like I said, blow up those curves and also add in some more light values in the stripes that you see at the top of that design, and also on the left side, so that the darker areas are going to come forward, and the lighter areas are going to provide that depth that I was seeking. This is the finished top, and you'll see that I was fairly careful about positioning those turquoise sections, pieces of the design in various areas of the quilt, so that the eye moves around, trying to make those connections. I call this, this is a relatively part of a relatively new series that I've been working on for the last couple of years. I call them improv puzzles, because we're making, it's a block-based design, improvisational design, where we're making these block units and then putting them together like a puzzle. I don't have any idea what it's going to look like when I start. Each sort of decision that I make about color and shape influences the next, kind of like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, just something that I like to do. And I teach a really fun class on this process that really encourages my students to explore their own creativity and come up with something that's new and different.
Great. That class is called what?
It's called Improv Puzzles.
Excellent. So straight quilting.
So here's a detail of the finished piece. I love, love, love free motion stitching, but these puzzle quilts are quite busy. And sometimes I feel like adding in, I like to include different free motion stitching motifs in different areas of a quilt. But I felt like in this particular one that, trying to do that would take away from the design of it. So there's a lot of quilt styles that I make that I want the quilting to be an integral part of the composition, not just, a way to hold the three layers together. But in these quilts, there's so much going on in them, and I'm so interested in the compositional design that I decided to do just the vertical stitching. However, I like to space the stitching in an irregular fashion. So it isn't just, half-inch lines, nor is it eighth-inch matchstick quilting, but I stitch it so that my walking foot it's stitched with my walking foot. The lines are about a half an inch apart. And then I go back and stitch between those lines, but only on some of them.
Right.
So that you can see the irregular spacing, which I think adds more texture than it would if it was more predictable.
And you use a variegated thread.
I do use a lot of variegated thread, and that's always an interesting choice because particularly in a quilt like this, which has a lot of the wide variation in value, I wanted to make sure that my light areas stayed light. So I needed a light thread. Often when I'm auditioning threads, I'll unspool a length of the thread and lay it out against the quilt, the threads that I'm considering, and see how the thread hits the light areas and the dark areas. So in this quilt, it was kind of interesting. The one that worked best was a variegated sort of baby pastel. And so it gives just a little bit of dimension, a little bit more texture than a plain, just a plain thread would do.
What weight thread have you used? Because it's quite obvious, so it's not.
So it's a 40 weight in the top, which is, a fairly heavy weight for quilting. I use a thinner 50 weight neutral thread in the bottom, in the bobbin, because I want that make sure that the bobbin pulls the thread into the surface and doesn't pop up and form those little eyelashes that you can sometimes see when the threads are closer to the same weight.
Here you are, sewing on your trusty Bernina by the look of it.
Yep, it is an old Bernina, a 440. I have pieced on this for many years, and I did all of my walking foot and free motion quilting on it for a lot of those years. I have recently, in the last couple of years, invested in a Bernina Q20, which has the wider 20-inch throat area. I don't have the handles. I still sit down and do the free motion because that's how I learned, and that's how I feel most comfortable. But
that's what I have as well, and it's really great for free motion.
Yeah, it's just wonderful.
You go off into your own little Zen moment, don't you? It's like,
That's right. Yep.
I need more space to quilt. I need more space. That's I just keep using it. I love it.
This quilt is about 30 by 40 inches. So it's not huge. That's kind of the size that I am that's kind of my default size. But in the last couple of years, I've really wanted to push myself to make quilts that were bigger and have more presence for the wall. I spent about 10 years traveling around the United States, showing and selling my work at fine art and fine craft fairs. And I was setting up a booth, my work in it. I was showing art quilts to people who weren't necessarily familiar with quilts as an art form, as opposed to a utilitarian bed covering. So I kind of thought of myself as an ambassador for the art quilt, but I needed to make some bigger pieces so I could have something to draw people into my booth. And having the bigger machine has made that certainly a lot easier. This quilt, I finished it last winter, right before everything closed down. And I was really thrilled that it was accepted into the Intersect Chicago show that SAQA was one of the first shows, I think, that SAQA participated in, sort of a fine art type show. And so it was a virtual show, so the quilt didn't go there, but it was quite an honor to be juried into that show with this piece.
Yes, I think it's really interesting that you did the fine art shows. I really I admire you for doing that, and obviously it was quite successful for you because you were doing it for a long time. Do you foresee going back to those when life gets back to normal?
No, I think I've retired from that.
It's
It's,
hard work,
it's
the travel
hard
and
work.
setting up
It's
and
very
stuff.
hard work, driving because I'm on the East Coast of the United States. I did a lot of shows on the East Coast in the Midwest. I did some shows on the West Coast, but you'd have to fly there, and just the physical labor of putting up and taking down the booth or the tent or both is
Yeah,
hard. And I'm doing a lot more teaching now, and I enjoy that. So I
yeah.
do still have my work in various places. My work is represented by artfulhome.com, which is an online art gallery. And so I'm still out there showing and selling my work, but in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah. All the links to these places like artfulhome.com are in the description box below. So please check them out, and you might find yourself having an original Cindy Grisdela in your own home, which would be really great. This is the final version of this quilt, but we're also going to just briefly talk about a couple of other quilts. So would you like to talk about them now?
Absolutely. So I think of improv design as a little bit like sourdough bread. I think a lot of us have learned a lot about sourdough bread in the last months. And the reason I say that is that often because you don't know, you're not following a pattern, you don't have really a template or any rules except for rules that you as the artist set for yourself. And so often you make elements blocks, whatever, that don't fit into the finished quilt. And I'm a very intuitive artist and designer. I don't really sketch things out beforehand. I don't use a computer. I just need to cut into the fabric, create the shapes, and put it up on the wall to audition it and see how it works. So that means that sometimes I have a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't make it, and it gets put into a leftover basket. Even if I hate it, it gets put into a leftover basket because you never know when you look at something with new, fresh eyes and a new composition, it might be just the thing. So this quilt, I stopped traveling to teach and lecture in late February last year. And so I had time at home in my studio, which was a luxury for me because I'm usually on the road 2 or 3 times a month. And so I put these were leftovers from a previous quilt. I put them up on my design wall. I kept walking past them and tweaking them, and there was something about it that just wasn't quite right. And I show this because I think that it's important for people to understand that even those of us who do this all the time, it's not always a walk in the park. So I had these up on my wall and for weeks and weeks, and it was great that I was at home because if I had been traveling, I probably would have just sewn this quilt up. And so I finally realized that I had two quilts here and they were fighting one another. So I made some choices and you'll see they were. So I severely edited my color choices in this piece to that sort of odd. I don't know what it was about last year that I was working with odd color schemes, but that aqua, white, chocolate, brown, and red. And so I edited nearly everything else out and stuck with that color recipe. And you might ask, looking at the center where I have another one of those little improv squares with the insets radiate out. You might say, Cindy, did you forget that was in there? And no, I didn't. I made another one of those blocks using the fabrics the colors that were in the rest of the quilt. And I put it up there on the wall, and the whole design went flat, just
Ah,
was not interesting at all. And so I said, okay, that's something interesting to find out. So I put the old one back, and there's also a couple of others. There's some of those little 3-inch squares with the dots that have a sort of a royal blue and an orange around that space as well. So what I like to tell my students is this was a cautionary tale for me, that I need not to be in such a hurry to finish things up. I need to listen to my instincts about what's working and what isn't. And I need to be willing to give it time to marinate and to come into itself. Oftentimes I think there's a misconception about improvisational design, that it's fast, that you're just making your pieces and throwing them up on the wall. And it really isn't. If you are going to make a composition that has thought in it about color and design and those sorts of things, you have to give it time. So that's why I like to show this quilt in my classes and lectures, just so that people can understand that we all have moments where things don't work, and you just have to keep auditioning, keep listening to that little voice inside that says, wow, this is really good now, and then go for it.
Yes, I always sort of feel like a quilt is not finished until it's finished, and it usually tells you when it's ready. That's really interesting because, yeah, that sort of block, I went, oh, okay. Yeah, I can see the reasoning behind it. And I love the turquoise and white combination. I think it's really very vibrant.
It's called Picasso's Chickens because I shared it on social media, and I said, I've just finished this quilt and I'm not sure what to call it. And 2 or 3 people said it looks like Picasso with chickens or something like that. So I said, oh, I really like that name, and that's what happened.
That's great. It's a great name. So here we have your studio. Is this on a good day or a bad day?
Oh, this is on a good day. I had my photographer come. I'm working on a new book, which I'm excited about, and I needed some studio shots, and so I had my photographer come. I cleaned everything up, and I had my photographer come and take pictures. My husband and I downsized a few years ago, and I like to say that I got a smaller house but a bigger studio.
Perfect.
And that works out really well for me. So you can see my design wall, my ironing station. I have actually a really lovely weaving loom
Yes.
that I used to weave back in the day. I haven't in years, but I keep thinking I might sometime. So, and you see my my collection over on the upper right of my Aqua auction quilt.
Good.
Those are my collection, and then in front of the window are my sewing machines.
Yes, I sort of, my eye went to the Sakura auction collection because I can recognize quite a few of the artists there. And for those that don't know, Sakura Studio Art Quilts Associates has an auction every year of 12-inch squares. And Cindy has obviously bought some nearly every year by the look of it. But it's lovely to have other artists' work also in your studio to inspire you. I have others through the house, and it always gives me joy that I'm hoping that, some of my work is in other people's houses as well. It's just really nice to sort of share and be inspired by other people's work as well. So this is a couple of quilts happening on the wall. So would they be for your new book?
They are, well, the you can see the the pieces of the Neapolitan quilt are on the right there. The partial quilt in the middle is a quilt that is going to be in the new book. And the confetti quilt, the finished quilt on the left, there is going to be a version of that quilt in the book as well.
Great, look forward to it. So this is just the other end with your beautiful
This is the other end. I look over the lake when I sew, which is really lovely. So you can see my piecing Bernina in the center there, my Q20, and the on the right side with a fairly big quilt underneath the needle there. I keep my fabrics in these runner baskets, and they're arranged in a organization that makes sense to me, because our fabric is our paint. It's our raw material, so we need to be able to get to it and know where it is.
Fabulous view. I think I'd be staring out into space and contemplating my navel for most of the time. It's really lovely. So,
Yes.
like many of us, you have switched to online teaching and lecturing, and I know you have quite a range of classes. Are you enjoying doing that? Is it it's completely different for everybody. So, how are you finding it?
It is completely different, and I didn't know anything about virtual anything when all this started, and I was sort of pushed into it by a guild who I had contracted to visit in April, and they were in New York State, and New York was in a terrible time then, and I wasn't going to be able to travel, and they said, "Would you consider doing this virtually?" And I said, I had no idea what that meant, and I said, "Okay, sure, yes, that would be wonderful." And then I had to just throw myself into learning how to how to shoot videos and how to, I mean, I knew about putting lesson plans together and everything like that because I'd been teaching for a while and written books and things. I love it. I really do. There are so many positives to it. I'm so grateful that we have this technology that allows us to continue to share our love of quilts and quilting, even though we can't travel. I've heard from so many students and participants in my lectures that they like it too, that they don't have to, they don't have to drive at night. They don't have to, to go to a meeting to listen to a lecture. For the students, they're in their own studios. They have their, so often when you're doing an on-site class, the students are bringing in a sewing machine that's more portable than their favorite machine.
Yep.
And the chair's not the right height and they don't have all their fabrics. And so they have everything they need right at their fingertips. And people say that they really like it and they would like it to continue. So I plan to continue to offer virtual and on-demand classes as long as people are interested in having them. I do miss the hands-on, the touching of the fabrics and the quilts, but I think that there's definitely going to be a place. I'm really enjoying it.
I am too, and I'm finding that I'm able to travel virtually to places that would never have been able to get me, because all the way in Australia, for me to teach at a small guild in the middle of nowhere, it's lovely to be able to meet people definitely in places that I would never, ever have been able to get to. So I'm really enjoying that as well. So as I mentioned before, all Cindy's details for her lectures and her classes and her books are all in the information section below. Everything's on her website, and I hope you'll check it out. I'd like to thank you so much. This has been really good. I've loved your work for ages, so it's lovely to see how your thought processes have sort of worked, and how, like me, like probably everybody, sometimes you just have to think a bit longer and things might not work, and they might work the next time. It's been really great. So I hope everybody's enjoyed this chat with Cindy, and that you'll click on that subscribe button below. I'd be really grateful. And thumbs up, definitely. Thumbs up is very important. And please comment. Leave comments. We'll both love to read them. It's been very gratifying to have your support for these videos. And there are a lot more to come. Thank you, Cindy. And I hope to see you sometime in the near future.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Lisa, for having me. I really do appreciate it. And thanks to all you listening in.
Great. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.